Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. We have today in this session, we are very lucky to have Rachel Anderson, who is Assistant Director of Policy at the North East of England Chamber of Commerce. And today, Rachel's going to be sharing her thoughts on the current economy of the Tees Valley. This session is part of our Support and Progression series, which is delivered to support teachers, careers advisors, educational staff to support students and young people progressing onto higher education. So we do have a variety of events running this week and next. If you are interested after today's session, you'd like a little bit more, you want to find out what else is on offer, please do have a look on our website as to what's available. I'll do a little bit of housekeeping as well before we start. So we are using Teams Live today. Just to make you aware, we can't hear or see you. You don't have to worry if you've not done your hair or makeup, that's fine. If you do have any questions that you'd like to pass through to Rachel while she's presenting, if you just want to use the Q&A function, which should be in one of the corners of your devices, and what we'll do is at the end of the session, we'll go through those questions with Rachel. Just to let you know as well, we are recording the session, so the sessions will all be available on our Teachers and Careers Advisor web pages after the event. So if there's anything that you'd like to attend but you can't, please keep an eye out for an email from me and you will be able to watch them later on the website. But I will hand over to Rachel now. We'll just make you live, Rachel. There you go.
Thank you very much, Jade. Can you hear me? Wonderful, and good afternoon, everyone. It's lovely to be presenting to you on this sunny afternoon. What I wanted to do today is go through, really give you a flavour of the economy of the Tees Valley, but also what's coming up in the future and what we see will be some of the growth areas for probably over the next 10 years or so. So just to give you a little bit of a heads up on the Chamber of Commerce, because we're always aware that some people don't actually know who we are or what we do. We're not a branch of the Conservative Party. We're not a branch of government. We're not a gentleman's lunching club. We are actually about 206 years old and started in Newcastle in 1815. So there's not much that we haven't seen over those 206 years. We've got about 3,000 members across the northeast of England, and that goes from the Nissans, the Hitachis, the PD Ports of this world, down to we have a one-man band window cleaner in membership, and all points in between. There isn't a sector that we're not represented in. However, we don't really do an awful lot with agriculture. We don't know much about sheep, so we leave that to the NFU. And we're probably not that well represented in the very small retail sector, so things like corner shops, that kind of thing. There's not much we would do with them. But we do think that we cover about 1/3 of the workforce of the North East. We try to act as a voice for business and try and make the business environment better, as well as offering things like networking events and that kind of thing. And we also have a very large international trade department, which, as you can imagine, is probably being kept very, very busy at the moment. We do all the documentation that goes out of the northeast of England. So if you're hearing an awful lot about things like certificates of origin and country of origin, we're stamping all the certificates for that. So our international trade department, we're working over New Year and Christmas, and we're living in interesting times, that's for certain. So that's a little bit of a flavour of the North East Chamber and why I'm maybe qualified to speak to you about this today. So to the Tees Valley, to be clear where we're talking about, it's the 5 boroughs around that surround the Tees: Hartlepool, Stockton, Darlington, Middlesbrough, Redcar and Cleveland. They're 5 unitary boroughs and work together very well. So that's the area we're talking about. And we also have an directly elected mayor. So that's the area. We do have some travel to work area in Durham and in North Yorkshire. And we do see migration into the Tees Valley from those areas to live and work. And I think certainly in North Yorkshire there are many companies there that naturally look to the Tees Valley for their markets, for their services and that kind of thing. But for the purposes of this, these are the 5 boroughs that I'm talking about. So just a little bit about the Tees Valley itself, just to set a bit of a scene. We've got a total population of around 676,000 people. That's been reasonably static over the last 10 years or so. We haven't seen much inward or outward migration, and that spawns around about 22,000 businesses, which is probably on the low side in terms of businesses per head, and it's probably one of the issues that we have in the Tees Valley is around business startup and business creation. However, we do punch well above our weight in terms of exports and what those businesses produce. Because last year we produced about £3.3 billion worth of exports, and those go all over the world. Our key market is mainly the EU, but also to certainly the US and even to China, particularly in terms of steel. Now a Chinese company has bought British Steel. And those 22,000 businesses, along with some public sector, create about 294,000 jobs across the Tees Valley, and of those 119,000 are what we would call highly skilled jobs. I think maybe that coronavirus has changed what we see as low skilled jobs, and we need to maybe the powers that be need to refigure what high skilled jobs actually are. But for the purposes of this, we mean certainly things like higher skilled engineering jobs, things in chemicals, that sort of thing, rather than maybe something around retail. And that's not to disparage retail work, but the highly skilled jobs are the ones where you need higher level qualifications and training or something like an apprenticeship. One of the areas that we do need to make some improvements as an area, and some of the things that perhaps might be something to do with the government's levelling up campaign, is that our median weekly earnings are a long way behind the UK average. I mean, obviously, if you raise yours, the average raises, but that's a significant gap. At £525 a week plays 586 on the UK average, and our unemployment rate is higher than it should be. It's not the highest in the country. It was for many years, but not anymore. Some parts of London beat us to that one, but at 7.8%, it's consistently around about 1.5% to 2% higher than the national rate, and our NEET rate is higher as well, at 4.1%. So, well, we do have a successful economy, and certainly we have a very successful outward-facing economy. That doesn't always necessarily translate to our employment rates and our NEET rates, and I think that's one of the key challenges that we've really got to look at as an area. So looking at where our employment and trades are, particularly in terms of the levels of trade, I think what this graph really shows you is that we've got good levels across the board of employment in the different trades and sectors, but we don't do much management here. And if you look at the sort of senior managerial and the professional and the associate professional and technical, we're well down on other northeast areas and national areas. But if you look at areas like skilled trades, customer service, processes, manufacturing process, that kind of thing, we hit above our weight there. So what that really tells you is some parts of the Tees Valley we're looking at, and we've known for years, is around, in terms of inward investment, we're a bit of what we call a branch plant economy, whereas we've got really successful plants here and really successful manufacturing, but head office is elsewhere. And we find that all regions have this issue, but it's probably a bit more pronounced in the Tees Valley, that the big decisions aren't made here. So if there are rounds of closures to come, those decisions are made somewhere else, and that's always been a difficult thing. One other thing that does translate for us as well is that quite often, in terms of senior managerial figures, if they're working for a multinational company, they tend to move jobs in that company every 2 to 3 years. So you don't always get a really good managerial sector rooted in the area, and they usually work for the company rather than for the area. So again, that's probably one of the reasons why we struggle a little bit in terms of our economy. But things are changing, and I will come on to that later. In terms of the sectors that people are employed in, it's very clear to see where some of our major employment is, and that's in the health and social care sector. Obviously, there is NHS in there, and I think there's only Walmart and the Red Army employ more people than the NHS do around the world. So that's why those figures are consistently high, and you would find that in every region. But we also do have some good health and social care companies here. So, for example, the Priory, that many of you will have heard of in celebrity magazines around for drug rehab and that kind of thing, their headquarters is actually in the Tees Valley, and so they get counted in that figure. So that could be why it's a little bit high. We've also got a high level of creative and leisure companies, so we've got a lot of pubs and bars in this area, but you see also we're very strong on manufacturing and very strong on logistics, and we have other sectors that are coming up, but I'll come on to that in the future. So that gives you a picture of where people are employed. The one that's probably missing off here that is a big employer is the public sector. Nowhere near as big as it used to be 15 years ago, but still a significant employer, and that would be where those are made up. So what about the future? What do we have in the Tees Valley? What's coming in the Tees Valley? Where are we likely to see the growth? And what do we say generally about the future? Well, frankly, the future's so bright, we've got to wear shades. And this was my excuse for putting a dog in sunglasses into my presentation, because I feel every PowerPoint presentation should have a dog in sunglasses in it. But we've got to wear shades because we do have a very bright future ahead of us. What do we do? Well, to go through a few sectors here of where things are happening, chemistry is one of our big sectors. We've always known it, and if anybody spent any time ever around the Tees Valley, the chemical industry has dominated it for a very, very long time, particularly from the days of ICI, and we still have a huge legacy of that. This is the Wilton site, and is probably what they call the largest chemistry set in Europe, and this is where one of the real drivers of our chemical industry comes from, and as we've seen, it's a significant employer in the area. A lot of old style chemistry goes on there, just sort of refining, processing, that kind of thing, and also in terms of things in the world that probably aren't that fashionable anymore, we produce an awful lot of PET plastics, so single-use plastics, on the Wilton site, and that will continue. We still produce Coke bottles, that kind of thing. And there are other things coming on the site, but things are starting to change. There are new sectors and new products that are coming up. So one of them, for example, is graphene. We have a company who work out of the Wilton site who are at the forefront of some of the uses of graphene, the new wonder technology, and they're using it for painting coatings in paint, to make very thin paint coatings, and I believe some of that are going on the new SpaceX ships that are going to the moon and then Mars, and they're looking at putting some graphene coatings on those ships, and that's research and production that's all being done at the Wilton site at the moment. It's small scale, but it will get bigger, and it will go literally stratospheric in terms of world demand for graphene. Similarly, those plastics that we were talking about and the recycling of plastics, we're now starting to look at, well, if we're producing the plastics, then perhaps we ought to be doing something with them. And so we've got companies now that are looking at cracking the plastic back down into its base components, so taking the oil back out of the plastics and reusing them to make new plastics, and so your Coke bottles suddenly become green Coke bottles. And we're probably one of the only areas of the world that at the moment has the technology both on site to produce the plastics and to crack the plastics back down. It's very new technology, but it is happening. And again, Teesside is at the front of what's going on. So, you know, it's an example of an industry that is moving with the times and moving with public opinion, and all the jobs that creates. We're taking in waste from other areas. We currently process all of Liverpool's waste. In terms of taking some of the plastics out of it, we turn some of it into electricity, but it's what's called the circular economy, and that's a phrase that you're going to hear an awful lot more over the next few years, in terms of making sure that we recycle around 95% of what we do. Similarly, you'll have seen the oil rigs coming in at the Able Yard in Hartlepool. 95% of those old Brent oil rigs that are coming in at the moment will be recycled into other things, and it's a real niche that the Tees Valley is carving out for itself. We've also got a real big strength in biomedical. This is a sector that has crept up, and about 7 or 8 years ago, Darlington won the right to host the National Biologics Manufacturing Centre, which is the new wave in medical science and medicine. So whereas previously and now you'll go to the doctors and you'll get a very generic drug for whatever it is that ails you, that won't be the case as we go into the future. All medicines will become personal, and they will be targeted to your particular genetic makeup, and the research and the customization and bringing to market for that is being done at CPI in Darlington, and it's also been done at the New Horizons Centre in Darlington, the National Horizons Centre, which is looking at ways to commercialise those things that are being found in Darlington. So we see that there will be a huge spin out for biomedical companies, new biomedical startups, and these two facilities have been put here because of the East Coast Main Line. They're right next to the East Coast Main Line, and that's because they are then equidistant between Edinburgh, which is one of the big centres for biomedical science, and Cambridge, which is the other, and it makes a huge amount of sense to put these in Darlington, and they will only grow in terms of biomedicine, and they're bringing a huge number of very skilled chemists, very skilled science workers in science to the area, and that demand will only grow. So at the moment we've got colleges and excuse me, Tees University putting together training packages for local people to really be able to match that demand for scientists that we're going to have. And of course there will be the facilities there for those companies to use and spin out of. Well, I doubt we'll be another Silicon Valley, but you know, certainly in terms of biomedical science, we will have a big cluster here. There's GSK at Barnard Castle, Fujifilm, and of course they're making the Moderna vaccine that we all know, and some of us will be having over the next few weeks. Engineering's another big sector, and many people think engineering looks like this, and it's all a bit mucky and it's all a bit filthy, and it's metal bashing, and there is some of that goes on, and it's still a sector that is hugely rooted in the Tees Valley. We make components for things like the oil and gas industry and oil and gas transition that is coming, and we make components for machinery. We still do all of that, and we still have a very, very strong engineering sector. But I would say that there are other things that in the engineering sector that we absolutely excel at in the Tees Valley, and this is where the drive for and need for engineers is going to come in the future. So, for example, that is the Singmar Bridge in Hong Kong. It was designed and built in the Tees Valley, or the components of it were built in the Tees Valley. Obviously, it was actually built in Hong Kong, but it was designed, all the components were made, it was engineered in Darlington, and that is the Singmore Bridge, and Cleveland Bridge go on to make others around the world and fix some of the bridges that they've previously made. We also are building most of the components for the new Dogger Bank wind turbine facility, which will produce around about 25% of the UK's electricity when it is fully operational, completely green electricity with no emissions, but there needs to be footings for wind turbines, which you can see here. These are jokingly referred to as the BYTs, which sounds like it could be terrible technical, but it's not. They're called big yellow things, and they go out from the Tees and will be producing wind and green electricity for the next 40 years or so. We also need things like the umbilicals that go with them, all produced in this part of the world and laid in this part of the world. And then there's this one. I don't know if anybody knows what this is, but it certainly exists. This was the steel, and the design for this was done by a company in Saltburn, and it is the Virgin Galactic spaceport in New Mexico in the US, where Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic space planes will be taking off from, and people will be going into orbit. Absolutely cutting edge design, and all done by a company in Saltburn by the sea. So something to be really proud of for Teesside. But again, it's that real engineering now and know-how that's coming. We'll also see things like a shift to electric vehicle production, or certainly electric vehicle battery engine production. That's likely to come, and all this will need a workforce, and we'll need a very highly skilled workforce. Certainly in engineering, we're seeing some of the wage rates now for starting engineering apprentices once you've completed in the very, very high 20s into even the low 30s now in terms of starting wages. So those wages are there, and careers are there as well. Also looking at digital, and if anyone's got children or teenagers, you'll know about all of these. So Minecraft Dungeons, Harry Potter, the Lego Harry Potter series for the PS4 and for the Xbox, and Little Big Planet, all made in Middlesbrough. Every one of them. So if you've ever played one of these games, or you've shouted at your teenager to stop playing the games and go and do something less boring instead, I'm afraid it's Middlesbrough's fault that you're doing that. But all produced at Boho 1 in Middlesbrough, and we have a thriving gaming sector, producing some of the big worldwide hits, working with Sony, working with Disney, working with EA Games, excuse me, and we have a big sector which is employing a lot of young people and taking a lot of local people, and it's one of the big cries that they have, that they can't get enough coders and they can't get enough local people to engage and to come and work for them, and they will take all the workforce that we can produce for them. But it's not just gaming that we do either. We actually run the New York City subway from Stockton. There's a company called Cubic who are on the business park at Stockton, and they do the computer systems for the New York City subway. They do the computer systems and the ticketing system for the Sydney Underground. I'm sorry, that's a bit of a wonky picture, but yeah, for the Sydney Underground, and they work with, I think it's also the Miami transportation system. They do that as well. So it's not just gaming that we do, it's all practical logistics as well. So moving on to logistics, which takes me nicely onto that. We have one of the biggest, deepest ports in the country, and it's a port that's about to get bigger, but we'll talk about that later. huge logistics operation, sending goods all over the world from Teesside, unloading goods all over the world. Probably less so now that the Evergreen was stuck in the Suez Canal, but we can probably see a surge coming through as they all arrive from when they were being stuck. But it's a huge operation, bulk chemicals, bulk oils, as well as a container port, and will only grow. It's also one of the few ports in the country that is a 24-hour active port, so you don't have to wait for the tide to sail. It's deep enough for ships to sail 24 hours, and there's not many ports that you can actually do that from. Also at Redcar Bulk Terminal, we can take some of the biggest ships in the world at that terminal. I think it's about 200,000 tonnes, which is probably the size of the Evergreen, but below the water. We can take that as a 24-hour port as well, and we've seen port activity increase enormously on the river. Similarly, this is the plans for the upgrade of Darlington Station that's coming. It's £160 million to move it 50 yards to the left. Which sounds ridiculous, but what it's to do is to make us HS ready, so that the trains don't have to pull off the main line through the station. They can just pull straight up. But it also opens up huge possibilities in terms of local transport, in terms of freight, and moving far more from the port, from our manufacturers by rail, which is a much greener thing to do, takes pressure off the roads, and the realignment of Darlington Station will do that. Large civil engineering project as well, and all very committed to local labour and local contracting to do that. So that will require a huge number of a huge workforce in the coming years. That's the Amazon warehouse that we've got. We've got several around the area. They've just announced another one, and we think there's another one in the pipeline as well. These enormous warehouses, they're huge employers, probably around 3,000 in this particular facility, and while there are a mix of roles in there, certainly it's a big logistics commitment to our region, and they create an enormous amount of logistics jobs. And then, of course, we've got the airport, which probably isn't massively known for its freight at the moment, but the Mayor certainly is hoping that it will be, and there are plans to develop the south side of the airport into an aviation hub for freight logistics in terms of aviation. So you have to get the things to the airport, you have to get them on planes, you have to get them elsewhere in the world, and that's a huge logistical operation that takes some scale again. Hopefully drawn from local people, and these are things that are coming and will happen. There's also lots more. There's professional services. We've seen certainly the announcement that the Treasury is to move to Darlington, and move everything. We've had an enormous number of inquiries from professional services firms, certainly from London, who previously wouldn't have been here and wouldn't have looked at the northeast. They all now want to be near the Treasury. So I think office space in Darlington is about to get very expensive, particularly anywhere near the Treasury. But certainly that will be good for the Tees Valley, and hopefully we can persuade those in the Treasury and those working in professional services to come here and live here and bring their families here and spend their wages here, more importantly, rather than maybe coming up here and working 2 days a week and then 2 days from home and commuting back to London or the home counties or wherever it is. That's probably the big challenge that we have, is getting people to come and settle in this region. I mean, we all know it's great, but they don't. So that's a big job of work we're trying to do as a chamber at the moment, is convince them. We've already mentioned care and health services. We've got 2 university teaching hospitals now in this area. Hopefully we can get more, and we can get some renewal of our health and care services. The care sector is going to come up the agenda massively, and has so with COVID, and certainly how care work is seen, and how it can be merged with health services. So you can certainly see advanced qualifications for carers coming, and sort of carer practitioner, as in things like nurse practitioner. You can certainly see those sort of qualifications coming, and that demand we're seeing rising demand for it, and it's a sector that will only grow over the next few years. Tourism and events is another one. I think it's fair to say that, you know, Teesside is never going to give the Saint-Tropez Tourist Board much to sweat over in terms of bringing huge amounts of tourists here. But actually, we're seeing a lot of events-driven visitors to the region. One of the things that we can do is put on really good events here. So things like, we've got the Rugby League World Cup coming, the events like Kinrun, where there is a requirement for hospitality, for leisure to go around those visitors for those events. And certainly some of the new developments that we've got coming at Hartlepool and at Redcar with big water sports centres, and the National Museum for the Royal Navy, the big expansion there. You can certainly start to see that if we don't get overnight visitors straight away to the region, we'll certainly get day visitors, and there is a lot to do to service them too. So we can see definitely some growth in tourism and events, even though, you know, we're never going to feature in top 10 tourist spots for the world, really. We know that. And things like sports as well. I've already mentioned the water sports, but, you know, we've certainly got a big sporting heritage in this region, and we can certainly see more visitor in terms of sports and more sports development. As I said, you know, we're looking at a major international water sports centre. We've got one in Stockton with the rapids there. There's a look at maybe we could develop something for sailing and windsurfing out of a place like Hartlepool Marina. So that, you know, with that you get things like physiotherapy, sports science, those sort of things. So you can see there is a growth there. And then, as I said, everywhere has to be serviced in terms of food and hospitality. If we make the region wealthier, we increase wage rates, there is a lot more in terms of skilled jobs and a requirement there. Then certainly, you know, you can certainly see a requirement for greater food and hospitality. People will eat out more if they feel wealthier. I think it's really interesting to say that, you know, that there's a huge amount here that will be drivers of the economy, and it's those areas that maybe don't always get the headlines that, you know, will be some of the big employers, and food and hospitality is one of them. So we need to talk about the Tees, and we need to talk about what's going to be happening on the Tees, because it's going to be a seismic shift in the way that this region feels, in the way that it functions, and the jobs available, and the amount of sheer workforce that's going to be required here. And in terms of things like careers advice for our young people, actually we need to get on this now, to make sure that when all these opportunities are here, and they will come, our young people are really informed about what they need to do to get these jobs, what are the requirements, and I think it's a real job of work and a challenge for the area. So this is the what's now known as the Tees Works site on the Tees, formerly the SSI Steelworks site with the port in the middle of it. And this is all, other than the port, this is all going to be redeveloped and revamped, and will be the site of new industries and very, very new technologies, which we hope will be the launch pad for the Tees Valley to be a region really at the forefront and one that's recognised around the world for what we're about to do here. So in terms of, and I think what I might try and do is activate my pointer here. There's a pen pointer. So this site here is going to be the site of the new General Electric wind turbine factory, and we'll supply those wind turbines and the wind turbine blades for Dogger Bank the array that I told you about, but also we'll supply blades to other places in the world. Not a new technology, but certainly there will be some new technologies developed. So things like coatings, different shapes, with wind tunnels or elsewhere. But certainly, you know, the blade technology will develop to become more efficient. But you can certainly see things like umbilicals technology as well, how we transmit that electricity back to our, because it degrades as soon as it starts to move. So how we get it back here in prime conditions, so we've got as much electricity coming back in as possible. That's how we store electricity, and some of the research around battery technology for storing from wind arrays when the wind's not blowing. That sort of thing will all be coming in here. Further up here, probably around here, we've got here we've got the big minerals and aggregates will be coming in from Anglo-American mining to bring the new generation of fertilizer out of the ground, which is to send that out to areas like China where they don't have a huge amount of fertilizer, and that's the port that will go there, and that will be a significant operation that you'll all know is underway, under construction at the moment. Excuse me. We'll also have engineering, which will come onto this site here, and sort of smaller engineering, and a huge number of tertiary things around wind turbines. But there's also a lot more as well. There is carbon capture and storage, CCS, which is a very, very new technology, and will move us towards net zero, one of the government's big targets for net zero. This is one of the first facilities in the world that will do this, and it will take the carbon emissions from about 5 or 6 emitters on the Tees, so on the Wilton site, on the north bank of the Tees, and take their carbon emissions, consolidate them, and then pump them out under the North Sea to store them in the salt aquifers under the North Sea, and take that carbon that they're emitting out of the atmosphere. And it's the first industrial project. There is another one on the Humber looking at Drax, which is around generation, but this is the first industrial test bed to do this in a salt aquifer. It's brand new technology, not been done before. The government have backed some of it, but it's a consortium of oil companies, including BP and Shell, who are doing this and driving this, and that facility is going onto the Teesworks site. Absolutely brand new. We'll need training and we'll need a workforce, but that workforce will go on to work around the world, taking that ability and that know-how around the world. So hugely exciting opportunities for anyone who is getting into that technology. Huge engineering challenges, huge geology challenges, but a really, really exciting project, and it's coming to the Tees. There's also going to be a hydrogen transport test facility here. We already produce on Teesside about 30% of the country's hydrogen. We're going to need an awful lot more in years to come. We produce what's called blue hydrogen. We're not producing green hydrogen yet, but we will be. But the idea is that we build some test stations here for transportation devices, so lorries running on hydrogen, trains running on hydrogen, just to see how they work. And that facility is coming to the Tees Valley. So hydrogen is going to be massive in terms of the energy sector, but also in terms of chemistry. So we can see certainly colleges, we can see schools starting to teach about the benefits of hydrogen and its uses, and this will all be research that will be done on the Tees. We're also getting one, possibly two, biomass power stations. MGT is under construction at the moment, and a lot of people see biomass as being people feeding trees into power stations. It's not like that at all. It's actually things like waste wood and offcuts where wood's been used for something else, for the building industry and construction industry, say, and they use the waste product from that to power and build power stations. 25% of the UK's electricity generation is going to go offline by 2024, and there isn't really a big plan for replacing it yet, which is another presentation for another day. But when this biomass power station comes on, it will produce some of that lost power. So it's an exciting project. It's probably not necessarily at the cutting edge because there are other biomass power stations around, but it's certainly one of the biggest ones in Europe, and it's here on the Tees because they can get the wood chip in. Subsea innovation, as I said, if you're putting big arrays out at sea, you need a way to get the power back. So subsea trenching, umbilicals, that kind of thing. Company at Hartlepool, JDR Cables, is one of the world leaders in producing umbilicals for wind turbines and for the oil and gas industry. Mineral processing, as I've said, coming in from North Yorkshire. But one of the big things about this and about the Freeport, as it's going to be called, is that there has to be a research and innovation element to it. You can't just stick a big shed up and say, hey, we're on the Freeport. In order to be there, you have to show a commitment to research on the Tees, and doing new and innovation on the Tees. So in terms of researcher jobs, there will be a lot there. And overall, the bid for the Freeport says around about 46,000 new jobs in terms of servicing all these companies and their supply chains. Actually, if you break it down as well, part of that 46,000 is in construction, and it's probably a sector we haven't mentioned, but we think over the next 2 or 3 years we're going to need an extra 7,000 construction workers. We don't have 7,000 construction workers in the Tees Valley. We're going to have to import some labour, but also we're going to have to train, and we're going to have to persuade a lot of our young people that construction might be the industry for them. But that's not just about laying the bricks, it's about the civil engineering, it's about the quantity surveying, it's about all those skilled professional trades that go with construction as well, and we want to see them here on the Tees. So that's the end of the presentation. It's hopefully giving you a bit of a gallop around what we've got here, and we do have some really great stuff here, but also what's coming and what we really need to be gearing up for as a region. I think it's probably one of the most exciting times to have been in the Tees Valley, and it feels like there's been a bit of a shift. Not all of it will come off straight away. Some of it will take years to happen, some of it may fall by the wayside, but certainly in terms of new industries and new technologies, it feels like the region is becoming very diverse, and really capable of catching the wave, I think, that's going to go around the world, particularly after things like COP26 that we might get in November, depending on COVID. So I think, thank you for listening. I'm really happy to answer any questions if I can. So I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Like I said, if you do have any questions, please do fire them through using the Q&A function. I can see we do have one already. So somebody's just asking about work experience, Rachel, and do you know if there's any opportunities that you offer for students?
Do we mean as a chamber or as generally as a workforce?
I think they maybe mean as a chamber, but if you know either.
We haven't over the last year for obvious reasons, because if we do offer work experience, we like to give hands-on training, and make it meaningful work experience. We do offer it. We tend to do internships more than we do actual work experience, but that's to say, if we got the right student, we make allowances. So just get in touch and we'll see what we can what we sort out.
Brilliant, thank you. That was the only question. So there is a little bit of a delay between us speaking and people hearing us. So I'll just do another shout out. So if you do have any questions while Rachel's here, that was so interesting in the presentation, and I'm really impressed you covered such a huge amount of content in such a short time.
There was probably some that I missed out as well. You know, we've got a much bigger road logistics sector than I probably alluded to there, in that we've got most of the major supermarkets are here. Argos is here. They're big shed distribution centres at the moment, but I know certainly, particularly Amazon, are looking at things like the technology of drone delivery. Hey, we've put a drone on Mars, we can get one to Redcar, surely. And I think the reason that the Tees Valley is so attractive is that we don't tend to object to industry here. I think there is, we're very used to industry here, and we're very used to sort of having a permitted development around industry. We're not scared of it, and we know we still make things here. And so, I think that becomes quite attractive for testing new technologies. Oh, we've got a couple of questions.
Yeah, so somebody's just asked if you've got any posters or maybe promotional material that they can use to put up in schools, specifically thinking about those 16 to 18 audiences. No is the short answer, but I think that's something that certainly the Combined Authority should be looking at producing. And certainly, if you go on to the website of SEMCOR particularly, and onto the CPI website, they certainly have a massive amount of information on there that I'm sure that they would be very happy to share, and very happy for you to sort of print off and put on walls and that sort of thing. Brilliant, thank you. Somebody else has just thanked you and said it was extremely informative, which I completely agree with.
That's very welcome.
And then somebody else has just asked about the internships. Is there a central hub where they can find information, where they're advertised, or is it something they need to maybe chase up themselves?
If you want to get in touch with us through policy at neechamber.co.uk, that will come to one of us centrally, and we'll sort you out from there.
There you go, fab. And look, last one, by the looks of things, it says not a question, but just wanted to say how useful that presentation was. Excellent detail. I'm impressed with how much there was in there. I suppose it's just really promising, isn't it, for specifically our teachers and careers advisors that are in the session today, that they can go back and relay that information to their students that maybe don't always have the most positive, outlook maybe.
I think it is, and I think it is. It's probably the most positive time we've been around the Tees Valley episode. What I will say is the world is about to change. And that's not just COVID and work patterns and that kind of thing. The world's about to take a massive leap forward in the technologies that we use around the net zero agenda, around the green agenda, and that's a really great hook to get young people really kind of enthused and involved about it. But some of the real practical jobs are going to be here, and the sharp end of getting us to net zero is going to be here. So I think, if we can get our young people interested in those sort of careers and those sort of technologies, we can frankly make a killing as the Tees Valley in terms of really good quality careers and jobs, and we can get a really big cluster going here. But if we don't get young people interested and they don't do the right qualifications, we'll have to bring in labour from elsewhere, and we'll leak all that money out of the Tees Valley, and that would be a trick really missed if we didn't do that.
Speaking about qualifications, this next question leads in really well. So will there be a concerted effort on providing degree apprenticeships and a collaboration with new companies to provide this with the new port?
There certainly is. There's going to be a skills academy on the Freeport itself, which will be run by a consortium of colleges and universities as well. I think one of the conditions for siting on the Freeport, because there's a lot of tax breaks and advantages and that kind of thing for investors to come in on the Teesport, and there's going to be a lot of competition for space on there, I think. So probably one of the criteria will be around employing local people and upskilling local people through the Skills Academy. Similarly, I know that they're very keen on where there is a supply chain contract awarded, that there is a strong commitment to education and training in those contracts, and certainly where things are directly controlled, like the Teesside site, which are directly controlled by the public sector, there is a commitment for degree apprenticeships and upskilling, just to make sure that local people get those jobs.
That's great, thank you. That looks like it was the last question. I'm just going to give it a couple more seconds just in case. Usually something pops through as I tie up. But thank you very much for that, Rachel. It was so informative, so much information in there. As we know, for the people that are attending now, this session has been recorded, so if it's something you wanted to revisit, if it's something you wanted to share with colleagues, you'll be able to do that. We will get this recording up on our YouTube channel as soon as possible. Pop myself on the screen as well, and then you can see who's speaking. It's always nice. Again, there are, as you've seen from our calendar of events, a number of sessions running this week and next week. Quite a wide variety of events as well, so please do have a look on there and see if there's any other sessions that you'd like to book onto. All events will be open to book on up until the morning of the event. If you have any questions to follow up after this presentation, because as I said, there was so much in there, and you know, if you have any questions after the session, please do feel free to get in touch with us, and we can put you in contact with Rachel, and you can discuss the content. So yeah, thank you everybody that's attended. We do appreciate you being here, and we hope to see you at another event really soon. But thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Rachel.